Okay, welcome back. Call this meeting to order for the Finance Committee. First is approval of the agenda.
Sorry,
Just go ahead, Councillor Sloan.
point of order. Warden, can I ask about the in-camera session dealing with non-union specific? From my experience, we've done that at Central Elgin and open, and I just wanted to know what the precedent is for having it in closed, please.
I'll let Blaine handle that one, or Nick.
Thank you, Warden Jones. Through you to Councillor Sloan, and I believe Nick is coming to a microphone. I will lead off and then have Mr. Loeb provide further details. The primary reason, and again, I'll let Mr. Loeb provide further explanation, is we are still currently dealing with a number of our union associates, and we are in a position where we do not want that to impact those discussions and or negotiations. But Mr. Loeb.
That's okay. Sorry, if I may interrupt. I didn't mean to cut off Nick, but that's asked and answered. Thank you, Mr. Parkin, through the warden. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on with the approval. Okay, so we do have an addition that came from correspondence of the council meeting. So go ahead here.
Resolved that the agenda for the January 28th, 2025 Finance Committee meeting be approved as amended to include the ask from hospice for $100,000.
Mover and seconder, please. Noble and Sloan. All in favor? Motion carries. Moving down to adoption of the minutes. Go ahead, Catherine.
Resolved that the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting held on November 20th, 2024 be adopted.
Mover and seconder, please. Latham and Noble. All in favor? Motion carries. Down to disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Not seeing any. We have no delegations, so down to item 6.1, Director of Finance Services and Treasurer, 2025 budget Blaine, go ahead.
Thank you, Warden Jones, and through you to members of Finance Committee. I'll just provide a couple of opening comments, and then through you, Warden, I will hand things over to Jennifer to walk us through a very brief presentation that covers just a couple of details with respect to our business plan and budget for 2025. But off the start, as council is aware, we are in the midst of transitioning our process for developing our business plan and budget. And this year was the first year where we started to change some of those internal processes to a little different approach. And I'd like to just take a moment to commend our staff on the approach they've taken under Jennifer's guidance. She and her staff have obviously poured countless hours into the preparation of this plan, and all our staff have been thoroughly engaged over the past number of months preparing what's before committee this morning. And it's obviously our main intent this morning is to engage members of committee in some fruitful discussion as we prepare the plan for 2025. But I would just like to take a moment and recognize our staff and their efforts for the plan that they've prepared for committee's discussion. So with that, Warden Jones, through you, I would hand things over to Jennifer.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you, Warden Jones, two members of the committee. Welcome to the 2025 budget. And in this year, you'll notice that the format has changed a little bit as our slideshows project what we plan to do this year. So first of all, the presentations include a 2024 completed initiatives, and this outlines the key department successes related to what has been happening through the 2024 year. 2025 business initiatives is going to be highlighted to identify main business initiatives for 2025 and their relation to council's new strategic plan. So we have tried, oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Sorry, can you hear me now? My apologies. So the 2025 business initiatives is identifying the main business initiatives and their relation to council's new strategic plan where applicable. So as you know, this year council went through their strategic priorities and we've tried to identify our initiatives and put them into those specific areas. A budget highlights will identify the resources that are required and needed to complete those 2025 initiatives. And we have also included this year the prior and current year full-time equivalents that are supported in each of our departments. As well, you will see a slide with the 2025 proposed budget. This slide relates to increases in your departments from 2024 to 2025. And the full year actuals are not complete yet. And so we have included our actuals up to approximately December the 15th, which is when we had good numbers. So we would be still doing accruals and year-end entries. Today's format is outlined in order of, we're trying to keep managers doing their departments in the same areas. So you'll hear from myself, corporate activities, then you'll hear from Michelle, long-term care and senior services, Peter for engineering and facilities, and Matt for planning, land division, Brian for cultural services, Carolyn will be doing economic development, Andrea will join us for emergency measures and fire school, Blaine will be handling human resources and ambulance. Catherine will be handling warden, council, and agriculture and administrative services, along with Nick, who will then go into provincial offenses and collections, and then I'll end with information technology and financial services. I've put some high-level recommendations here for consideration. Certainly, we will add or change those as we go through these plans, but I just wanted to have a starting point to approve the budget as presented. You're only approving the 2025 budget. We do provide you with the 26 to 34 10-year plan. That's just in principle there for your information to understand what does the future look like at Elgin County. And then the budget will be compiled into a budget booklet, which is being worked on as we speak and posted on our website for a period of online public consultation or engagement as per council's direction. So having no further questions on that one, I can move into the corporate activities. Next slide. So corporate activities is one of the key departments that houses all of our revenue from our municipal partners. It provides the overarching support to internal operating and capital needs at the County of Elgin Service Department and mandated external needs of the corporation, such as our external partnerships with health unit, social services, ambulance services, in our department. So corporate activities, some of the key initiatives in 2024 were that we completed a new policy for county grants. The first consideration for the 2025 budget is included in this department as an increase of $241,000. And we have provided Appendix D, which outlines membership and program support details for council's consideration and approval. And that's a spot where there's all the memberships. You can decide if you want to continue with certain ones, add certain ones, or delete them. Reserves and reserve funds policy was also a policy that we provided in 2024. And we have added a Appendix A that reports on the 2023 reserves at the end of the year and as per the financial statements. And that's just to help guide some of the discussion throughout the plan for 2025. And then the budget direction was also reset this year to support the new strategic plan of council. Corporate services is another department that dovetails into corporate activities. And it's houses all of the more activity type based things like office supplies, renewal of insurance, and corporate memberships. So that's what's in that department. So in 2025, the main business initiative related to this department is to ensure funding is sufficient to support strategic priorities identified by departments and externally funded partners, and maintain reasonable increases for ratepayers while considering immediate short-term and long-term needs of the county. The priority number 3, service excellence and efficiency, and our goal is to optimize our business planning process. So the levy supports all department needs as mentioned for operating and capital, and they have been considered and adjusted based on what is occurring within other departments, and it's all captured within this department. In-year need for debt and repayment of the Terrace Lodge Capital Reserve will be a major part of this year, and the effects of increased interest costs to ensure sustainability within the 10-year plan is being also captured within this department. Success measures will be to maintain financial stability with ability to pivot quickly to accommodate the needs of CPI increase and interest rate fluctuations throughout the year. The 2025 levy will be used for department operations as and capital projects as follows. So the levy this year is 50.5 million. We'll go back to our departmental costs. So 2.8 million and 1.4 million for a total of 4.2 million will support our long-term care homes. That's the services part. The facilities part is under facilities. Emergency management includes ambulance services, and that is supported by 4.6 million of the levy. Corporate services, without the levy in it, is 2.9 million. Engineering and transportation is 19.2 million. Provincial offenses and administration is actually to us.
Counselor Cockett, did you?
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just looking at the numbers for engineering and transportation. Most of those numbers, if you add departmental costs and capital, equal the levy support, but that doesn't happen under engineering and transportation. So it looks like about 1.4 million or something like that difference. Is that just a typo?
No, the engineering portion does include the debt portion of which is the 1.4 million at the bottom. So we have incorporated that into our engineering department because it supports that capital. Provincial offenses to the county is a revenue stream. So there is a 10% gain on that for us. So it offsets some of the levy. Facilities, 4.2 million goes to the facilities. Community and cultural services, 4 million. Planning, land division, and economic development, 1.1 million. Information technology, 2.2 million. Administration, 1.6 million. Public health, human resources, 0.8 million. Public health and social services, which is on our partnership with the City of St. Thomas and the ministry, 4.4 million. Financial services, 1 million. And then again, the debt repayment is already incorporated into the engineering number. So what does all that mean? The 2025 levy required to support county services, as mentioned, was 50.5 million. And that is an increase over last year's tax rate of 2.94%. This year, the tax rates are affected slightly by the introduction of a new aggregate extraction category and ratio by the Ministry of Finance. Properties affected are going to be moved into this category and have already been done so. This new class VT has a lower ratio from the industrial class where they came from. So it went from 2.225 down to 1.810. So additionally, this new category is not expected to be subject to educational taxation.
Counselor Sloan, did you have a question?
I do, through you to the warden, or through you, warden, to Ms. Ford. Could we go back a slide? I'm having some trouble here. Last year, our budget was $101 million, 77 and 24 approximately. And I don't understand the budget that we've been shown here. Where's the 101 million that's our total budget? Am I missing something? And I apologize if I am, Ms. Ford.
Through you to Councillor Sloan. This levy, this just shows the levy portion that and how it is expensed. Any of the other amounts that are in here are already offset by the revenue portion. So the total budget that we have this year is 109 million, 109.7 million in total. And the levy portion is 50 million. That's the portion that we levy for tax. Everything else is paid for by funding.
And if I may, through you, warden, just to follow up, would the 109, where do we see that in the document and how much it's gone up from 2024, please?
I did not provide that in this document. I can provide, it will be provided in the budget document as a chart.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Next. So on the slide with the budget highlights, we have residential rate will be going up $20.15 as far if we were to accept this rate at 2.94%, that would be the effect on the residential rate. And then I have added some additional amounts there to show what the effects would be on residential, multi-residential, commercial, pipeline, new multi-residential and farm at the 0.23% that we had approved in a prior meeting. Next slide.
Just a second.
Yep.
Go ahead, Deputy Warden.
Jen, thank you very much for that. Just to put it in the context, when you consider the impact on residential, what is the average residential value that you're using for across the county? Last year was 260 some odd thousand. That's two.
I did not provide that. I focus more on the 100,000 because it's easier for ratepayers to calculate that easily for their own properties. It would be approximately $20.15 per 100,000 of assessment.
Understood, but just putting it into context, if the average house out there is a value of 260,000, that gives the homeowner an idea of what the overall impact of the budget would be. In this case, you're looking at $50.
If that is a number that we would like to have in the budget book, I can provide that.
Mr.
Go ahead.
There might be some educational component to that because currently homeowners may be thinking that their value is based on current market rate and it's not. This is deflated 2016 values. That's why I bring it up, just to make sure someone who's sitting in a $1 million home thinks, oh my God, this is going to cost me, and it's not, because that home may only have a value of 400,000 based on 2016 values. That's why I bring and raise attention to it.
And we can provide something in the budget book for that information if that's helpful.
Yeah, I would think a little context to it and verbiage to that would help.
So on this slide, we're going to talk a little bit about debt financing. So the completion of the Terrace Lodge redevelopment will require a decision in 2025 related to how much debt that Elgin will want or need to borrow to support the use of their reserves. So in reference to Appendix A, the reserve and the reserve funds available at the end of December 2023 shows a net of $5.6 million available for use. So that's available currently to us as cash. 24 million now exists in a negatively funded reserve called the Capital Fund Terrace Lodge. To date, Elgin has self-financed all but $1 million of the Terrace Lodge redevelopment by borrowing from its existing reserves, and these are not intended for this use. That puts a little bit of a stress on those reserves if we do want to lean on them for future use. So at current 19 million plus 2.4 million of construction funding is promised to the county from the province, Minister of Health, over the next 25 years. So that we have to wait for 25 years in order to recoup that money. Approximately 4 million is being needed to still be funded from Elgin to fully pay back the debt to ourselves. So what options should we consider to manage the debt financing and ensure reserves are available when needed?
Councillor Noble, I think, has a question.
Thank you, Warden. Through you. The Terrace Lodge was started multiple years ago, and I'm just curious why we didn't look at this financing element before the interest rates climbed to the level they were at, and why we're just looking at it now. If I could get clarification, that'd be awesome.
I wasn't treasurer at the time, so at this point, it's on me. So I will say that we did take out the IO loan in the first year that I was treasurer. We knew that we were going to have to do that work, but at that time, the interest rates were already increasing. And so if we thought it best to just wait, we did have access to a construction loan. So we were able to take portions of that out, but we aren't able to secure the loan until the project is complete. And that's one of the criteria of that loan that we have. So once your project is complete, you have a certain number of days after that project to secure the loan. So during the original discussions, when we started this process, the total debt that we had intended to take out was 25 million over 25 years. At that time, the interest rate was 2.04%, and the interest would have been $7 million. We would have to repay that at 1.2 million over 25 years, and the province is going to be giving us 785,000 a year towards that debt. Plus there would have been the 2.4 million one-time funding. That's approximately an additional 480,000 on the levy. So that's at least 1% on the levy in order to pay that as we originally looked at it. The current situation, and we have been riding the interest rates because they have been much higher than what they are now, but they are still higher than when we started this process. So if we fully financed again, that 25 million is now 42 million. So there's now $17 million expected to be repaid on interest over the 25 years. And that would be approximately another % on the levy. So we've gone from 1.2 to 1.7 in interest that are owing. We still are getting the same amount from the ministry, so that has not changed. So looking at different options, in option one, we could continue to fully finance this debt. 25 million over 25 years, we'd get 785,000. We still have to pay some of that money to ourselves. We don't fully recoup the $25 million. But that does have some pros and cons to it. Option two We could finance in the short term, and when we look at the long-term 10-year plan in the next 2 years, we do have some pressures there because we will have to lean on our capital reserve in order to move forward with some of our projects. So right now we have the ability to take out as much as 25 million, or if we want to, we could take out any amount in between that. If we looked at potentially 6 million, we could fully finance that using the infrastructure money from the Ministry of Health. So there would be no incremental effect on the levy for that purpose. So we would be able to do that for approximately 6 years. And then at the end of that 6 years, we do have some long-term debt. Some debt that we had 10 years ago is coming due in 2031. So we would be able to shift those payments that we are making on that debt over to self-finance the Terrace Lodge debt. So then we would be able to catch up on those 6 years that we are now drawing down on that money. So over the course of the 25 years, if we proceeded to do this, we would be able to self-finance the majority of that debt, or approximately the 19 million that we're expecting from the province. Next slide.
Councillor Noble, go ahead.
So the 25 million that we're talking about that we could use out of reserves, what was the income on that investment up until this point?
The majority of that for us becomes working capital. Some of that is been in the high interest rates we've been finding. Last year when we talked to you at year end, we had 1.4 million in interest from that. So there is some gain that we've had by not taking out that debt. But we are losing a little opportunity on that as well, because as we don't invest it, we won't have that interest coming in. But we do save, because I don't expect that, interest rates at 4.7% over the course of 25 years would be hard to, I guess, project. You can't really determine whether you're going to have one or two. And as interest rates drop, that ability to invest your money drops as well. So we'd have to be looking at very long-term, tying that money up for long-term periods, which really doesn't give us any gain as far as cash flow.
So that document doesn't really account for the income on that money when it's invested. So when we're looking at borrowing money to pay that, we're missing some numbers in there, right?
The opportunity cost, yes, we're losing that, but we're also not having to pay out the interest that we're going to be seeing. So are we going to be able to accommodate a 4.7% interest income in order to offset that? And really, what's the difference then whether we self-finance or we are investing? Right. So I'm just saying, if you're going to have a zero net gain, what's the purpose? Because you're using your ARL then, right? You're then leaning on your debt, then that drops your ability to borrow in the future.
Supplemental or? Good.
May I?
Yep. Go ahead, Councillor Sloan.
So just to follow up here, can I ask what the cost of the renovations, the total project for Terrace Lodge was, please?
35 million.
Thank you. And the government is going to be paying the 700 or whatever the contribution is on an annual basis for how long?
We will realize 19.4 million if you're doing that math.
Okay, so 19.4 is what the government's giving. We spent 35. It looks like from the forms that one was raised. So it's overall, it's $14 million. That's the deficit.
No, it's 24 million. Right now we
Okay, so
have
35. Government gave 19.4. So 1935 subtract 19 is 16. We raised 1 million in fundraising, it looks like, so that would be 15. I just want to help understand the numbers, please.
So we have not realized the 19.4. We've had to self-fund that, so that does not come to us until over 25 years. We have to self-finance. So the ministry money, we are financing the ministry money upfront.
So if I may, through the warden, to continue this, we are financing the ministry money up front. Does the amount that the ministry gives on an annual basis change?
No,
So it's capped at the 19 and current today's value?
correct.
Thank you.
I think you can continue.
Okay. So one of the things that I don't know if you're aware of, but past councils have leaned on this strategy of self-financing for both Beaubeer Villa and Elgin Manor rebuilds. So they were successful in these campaigns, and finance has been able to navigate this and to track this long-term strategy in the past. So we've successfully done this in the past. Proposed option 1 or option 2 are both able to be accommodated in the 2025 budget and beyond. And expected savings on either option keeps the tax rate lower for ratepayers into the future. So if we fully self-finance on option 1, the 10-year plan does show that 2026 and 2027 have a need to lean on capital reserves in the amount of about 8.2 million. Existing reserves may also be needed for other purposes to maximize funding opportunities. So this really impedes our cash flow, and fully self-financing at the maximum amount for a long period of time could be very tight for us. Option 2 is a hybrid model. Self-financing mixed with the smaller debt load enables the county share of repayment of the capital fund to be flexible in the future years. And use of budget to pay existing debt might be redirected to repay the outstanding unfunded reserve and supplement the Ministry of Health sooner, or when surplus exists, to pay down a larger share. The minimum debt amount of 6 million is needed in 2026, and then using the available current Infrastructure Ontario loan for Terrace Lodge does save us on administration and time and costs, and ensures that we have those funds available ready for next year. Reassessment of the 2027 needs and beyond is possible when the Transportation Master Plan is completed and we have better knowledge of what that looks like. Next slide.
Any questions at this time, or? Go ahead, Deputy Warden.
Through you, Mr. Warden, looking to Jen, at this point, are you willing to put forward a preferred option?
That's okay. Through you, Mr. Warren, to Councillor Ketchabot. If you were to ask for my preferred option, I would go for option 2. I feel that that is the more conservative way to go. And again, this is something that we have not completed the Terrace Lodge rebuild yet. This is going to happen in 2025. So this is just giving you the information that I have accounted for this in the budget, and that you can understand what I've done. Okay.
Okay, continue on.
So one of the things that we've been very prudent about is putting away some money for our growth reserve. And in 2024, we had growth of 1.46. This is down from a prior year of 4.9. And this results in approximately 1.1 million that will be able to be set aside into the growth reserve in 2025. Next slide. Some of the 2025 budget highlights on expenses. Social service support increased. We received information from our partner, City of St. Thomas, that they require another 35,000. Southwest Public Health Unit support increased by 102,000. Expenses increased, so we're putting a little bit of the growth reserve reduction from last year. We have some savings there, so we're going to put some of that again into the reassessment reserve to bring that up to a more realistic full year assessment from the prior partial year assessment. And 240,000 is going towards the new grant program, which is 0.5% of the prior year levy, or $48 million. Expenses again decreased on the growth reserve. So that is being used to accommodate some of the increases, and 69,000 for facility audits for admin, POA, and ambulance stations. This is for our facilities that the majority of those are rented as facilities, or on our corporate side for capital asset. Those facility audits are done every 5 years in order to inform our 10-year capital plan. So we like to know how those facilities are doing, and they're done by HVAC experts and other, I guess, industry lead people. Development charges study, we're going to put 65,000 in there so that we can get that process going. It does take several years to implement those and to bring those up to a full available dollars for us as we increment them throughout the years. And then in the capital expense, we do have some immediate needs at the ambulance stations in the amount of $88,000. Next slide. We have an increase on the corporate services budget of 88,000. 44,000 for our insurance costs and memberships, 3,000. Audit fees, 1,000. Telephone, 4,000, and bank fees, 0.2,000. And SCORE, we have moved that out of this area and put that over into council. So 30,000 is just a shift between departments. And then we have some payroll charges going down as well for 3,900, or yeah, 3,900. And then in the corporate activities, this is where the levy is housed. So of particular interest here is the revenue increases on this. So 2.4 million is our levy increase, which represents our 2.94% tax rate increase. And that's used to support all of our departments. 754,000 is part of that 2.4 that I just talked about for Terrace Lodge. That is expected to come in this year. And then 200,000 additional interest from current investments that we have related to our existing money. And then the rest are ones that we discussed already on the expense side. Additional to this, we've provided some appendices for your information. So Appendix A is your reserve and reserve fund balances at the end of 2023 as per the financial statements. The summarized version is Appendix B of your 10-year plan. So that is the high level, every department supported by the budget slides. Appendix C is a detailed version of the 10-year plan. So that's the expanded version of your operating and capital. And Appendix D is your 2025 memberships and program funding that you can review, and we can have a discussion on that if you like. If there's any further questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Thank you, Jen. Councillor Whitner, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Warden. Here to Jen. Jen, what is our debt capacity? Do we know that number?
It's approximately 148 million.
Wow.
We don't want to use it all at once. Any other questions?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, Councillor Sloan.
Thank you, through you, Warden, to Ms. Ford. So the 30,000 for SCORE, that wasn't reduced, that was just moved to another department, correct?
Correct.
And secondly, when you bring up 88,000 for ambulance services, we were at the start, I think it was Blaine that was going to speak in his presentation about ambulance services. Why is that brought up in this part? I'm just trying to understand how it works in. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Warden, to Councillor Sloan. In this facility, so in this department, we have the facilities for the ambulance bases. They lease our bases, so this is not part of their actual service that they provide. This is something that we provide to them.
Go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Warden. Last year, we had a surplus of approximately $3 million, and there was some consternation that we didn't find out about that until October. When a business in the private sector, or most governments, I think, look at having a year end by the end of March, perhaps, how are we going to do that this year to know what the surplus will be for 2024? We have a carryover from 23 to 4 of, as I say, approximately 3 million. So at what time will the budget surplus from last year, as we don't run a deficit, be made available, please? Thank you, Warden.
It is our hope that we can have that to you sometime in May, maybe early June. But at the end of the day, we would not want to live on our immediate prior year surpluses. We are a year out on our surpluses, so that gives us time and it gives you better information. So.
Councillor Noble, go ahead.
Through you, Warden, are we able to get information as to where those surpluses came from? Like I know we've heard a couple times about the 3 million. When I look at Appendix A, at the bottom of it, it's without my glasses, it's 5.5. But it'd be nice to know what departments that those savings came from. If we could have that, that'd be awesome.
That was provided to you at year end during that presentation, so we could find that and give that to you again. That would have been on October-ish when we did the year of 24, yeah, for 2023.
Okay. Any other questions for Janet this time? There's no further questions. We'll take a half-hour break for lunch and get right back at it. Thanks, Jen. Okay, we'll come back to order. We'll continue on with the presentation. We're back. Jen, you want to lead us off into Michelle's presentation, or?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. The next person to present will be Michelle, doing long-term care and senior services.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through to you to members of council. As Jen stated, it is presenting on the 2025 Homes and Senior Services budget. So next slide.
Michelle, could you bring your mic a little closer?
Oh, sorry.
This old guy's up the front can't hear.
Is that better? Okay, thank you. So the first slide speaks to our key department successes. And when you look at ministry inspections and long-term care, yes, we do have inspections, but I think we've had a successful year. We had some findings and we were able to put those findings back into compliance. So that's a good news story there. The Terrace Lodge redevelopment project, which you've talked about already today a bit, but phase 2 completion and occupancy in May of 2024. And the Committee of Management quarterly reporting was implemented and continues. We still have a very strong partnership with the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario. We've maintained our best practice spotlight organization designation. And each year we are implementing at least one best practice guideline. And we did the launch for the cohort 7 of the Clinical Pathways project in the fall. So we will be going live with that project in April. Additionally, we were successful in implementing the staff schedule care. That's the scheduling system for frontline staff schedules as well as the robocall system for call-ins. We've also, were successful in a contracted agreement for social worker services. And so our residents are now having regular services on site at each of the homes. A big move or a big transition for us is whenever a long-term care home changes pharmacies. And so we had that successful transition in the beginning of January of 2024. And case mix index funding, you'll hear me talk more about that throughout today's presentation, but we have been successful in maintaining that level of care funding through the CMI scores. We did some great work this year with our partners, so our corporate emergency planning team members, as well as our local fire departments and OPP. We did some code green, code purple, code black, code silver exercises. And actually we had members from the library and HR as well that attended that. And so that was a really good exercise planning for each of the homes. We also partnered with CMHA and did some wellness moments training in each of our homes, and I'll be expanding on that in today's presentation. And we also resumed aquatic programming at the Terrace Lodge Pool in 2024. So I'm going to walk you through some business initiatives. The first one is the implementation of what's already been developed, your corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. We're working on implementing that across the homes, but we've identified a bit of a gap. We need to drill down and we need to do a gap analysis and develop a policy and implement that with some training to support our resident-specific DEI care and service needs. And so that aligns with the organizational culture and workforce development and the service excellence and efficiency priorities. As I mentioned, we'll do some work on gap analysis, policy development, and we'll measure that through our resident and family satisfaction surveys. The second one is the implementation of an education lead and coordinator role to support recruitment and retention initiatives, mandatory education, and legislative compliance. So we're looking to implement one full-time equivalent across the 3 homes. So not one per home, but one to work across the 3 homes. It aligns with the organizational culture and workforce development priority. This role will provide support for orientation of our new hires, also support our student placements and our current staff. And when you look at returning staff from pregnancy leave or parental leave, that's 12 to 18 months quite often. And so they do need that extra support. And we often have directions throughout the year from the Ministry of implementing additional programs or education. And so this role would support that. It's a great need across our homes. They'll also support the work we're doing with clinical pathways, the inter-RI policy and procedures, best practice guidelines. This role will be responsible for tracking education, developing education if required, completing gap analysis, and conducting audits of the education programs to determine if we've met the needs, the learning outcomes and the competencies, and are we sustaining that? So I've outlined some metrics there. We don't currently have a new hire satisfaction survey. So we do a performance appraisal during the first, the probationary period, but we'd like to develop a new hire satisfaction survey and then observe those metrics and from year to year. And I've outlined some recruitment and retention metrics. We have student placements. We have a good number of them at Elgin Manor and Terrace Lodge, but we don't have a lot at Beaubien Villa, partially because it's a smaller home and it's more rural. And so I think this role would be able to support attracting some more student placement opportunities at Beaubien Villa. And of course, looking at the initiative where I'm speaking about mandatory education and legislative compliance, another metric would be our key performance indicator metric.
Yeah, I have a question. Go ahead, Councilor Noble.
Through you, Warden, just when we look at initiative number 2, should that be something that's led out of our HR department here at the county and not just at the homes?
Human Resources does lead education for our leadership team, so the management team. There's the recent training, I think it's through ARIA, that a lot of the management team did participate in that. We've had a lot of discussions with human resources over the last number of years about educational opportunities, but yes, they could support us with the orientation, the onboarding of new hires. That's a piece that they could support with, but it's being on site in the homes and doing that just-in-time education and providing that ongoing support across the 3 homes. Hopefully that's helpful.
Counselor Sloan, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Warden, to Michelle, your key performance indicators. What are your key performance indicators?
Those are, so when we look at the mandatory education and legislative compliance piece outlined in initiative number 2, we have emergency room visits, and potentially avoidable emergency room visits is the piece that's actually the metric. We have skin and wound metrics. We have falls and restraints metrics. So it's enhancing the education around those pieces as we implement best practice guidelines, and the clinical pathways are tied to each of those mandatory programs, which are also tied to our key performance indicator metrics.
Supplementary through the Warden, please.
Yep, go ahead.
Is there any financial metrics for your key performance indicators, i.e. the cost of long-term care, provincial averages, et cetera?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Good question, because I know you've inquired in the past, and so we now have some data that we can share. Just in the last few days, I've got some information. So provincial municipal home annual financial contribution information. So for the year of 2023, the provincial municipal contribution it was $28,000 for the operating, and between $4,000 and $5,000 per bed for the capital. And to compare that to Algon County for the same year, 2023, it was $24,000 per resident bed. That combined both operating and capital.
That's really good. That's impressive actually for what we deliver.
Yeah, Ed Finance has done a quick analysis of what 24 and 25 potentially looks like. I can share that if that, yeah, okay, just give me 1 second. Budgeted. Okay, so these are 2024 budgeted numbers. I don't have the provincial municipal home. I have only 2023, but for 2024, the operating budget was $15,962 per bed, and capital was $10,458 per bed, for a total of $26,421. And for 2025 budget at this point, we're looking at operating of $19,376 and capital of $9,615 for a total average budgeted cost for 2025 of $28,992 per bed. So still lower than the 2023 costs provided to us.
That's something right, apparently. That's great. Any further? Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to drill down on that, because if it is a savings to what the provincial average is, I would highlight it. But the provincial average, are you saying, is at $28,000 per bed, long-term bed?
This is provincial municipal beds. So there's 100 municipal beds across the province of Ontario.
And how many of them are ours, through the Warden, to you, please?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
You said there are 100. Oh, pardon me.
It just came in garbled. Could you repeat it?
Pardon me, sorry. You said there were 100 municipal provincial beds in the province. How many of them are ours in Elgin County?
3. Oh, sorry. There's 100 long-term care homes. I apologize in that are municipal.
Yeah,
there's over 600 long-term care homes in the province of Ontario. 100 of those are municipal homes. and
Got it.
some
So
additional.
that's. Thank you. Thanks very much, Michelle.
Okay. Okay. Next slide, please. So this slide speaks to education and development. I spoke earlier about mental health and the wellness moments that we were doing, and it was very well received at the homes. And so we're looking to provide mental health and well-being training through CMHA, which has developed a long-term care healthcare specific training to support staff in long-term care homes, and some leadership training, which we've identified would be beneficial for the registered staff. And again, the RNAO clinical pathways. So this aligns with the organizational culture and workforce development strategy. And the metrics we'll be looking at will be staff attendance, improved metrics, and health and wellness metrics, health and safety data, retention metrics. And again, because we're looking at the RNAO clinical pathways, I'm pulling in the key performance indicator metrics and the Ministry of Long-Term Care inspection metrics. Next slide. This is the implementation of software. So we've got, when we're doing the skin and wound, or sorry, the clinical pathways and some of the work that were required with the mandatory programming, we've been looking at software to support frontline staff, to support streamlined processes and provide efficient care and services. So the Skin and Wound app is a software that allows staff to use an iPad and take a picture of a wound every week or every day, and they'll have accurate measurements and view of what that wound looks like on a weekly basis to be able to determine how that's improving, instead of, I haven't seen it myself for a month because I haven't been on duty to do it on this particular day, but now I can see exactly what it looks like, whether it's progressing or improving, and send those photos to the physician or the wound care team for support and guidance. The other one is a Vital Signs app. So again, it's an app and equipment that connects right to Point Click Care as well. So instead of going around with my Vital Signs machine and writing everything down and then later entering it and comparing it to baseline data, it will go directly into Point Click Care, and it will give me an automatic comparison of, wow, your blood pressure is really up from your baseline, or your pulse has changed significantly. So it's early identification and recognition of changes. The dietary meal and texture, again, that's some software that will support ensuring that we have correct, timely access to immediate access to changes from the dietitian or physician orders. Medication incidence is again a software that will support minimizing medication incidents and learning from those. And we've talked about the clinical pathways. So that aligns with service excellence and efficiency. And the success measures would be, again, the key performance indicator metrics and the ministry inspection metrics. We're also looking at implementation of scheduling software options and attendance management system software options. We hear regularly from frontline staff about work-life balance and a request for some flexibility within our scheduling system. And so we've been talking with our vendor and learning about some options that are available. One of them is submitting availability or non-availability, as well as more master lines, having more weekends off. And through our most recent negotiations with our largest union, we do have a couple of letter understandings that we need to implement some weekend worker options. And the other one was the every other weekend off. So we've had those conversations, and they are able to provide us some support with both the scheduling and the attendance management system. Currently, We have some challenges with that because our payroll system is not compatible with our AMS policy, but we've had some good discussions with our vendor and we'll be able to implement some processes for support. So we'll be looking at the completion of staff satisfaction surveys with improved metrics. If we can implement some of the flexibility around scheduling and staff attendance metrics and recruitment and retention metrics. The number 6 is a mandatory implementation of the Inter-RAI long-term care facilities assessment and reporting. So you've heard me talk at Committee of Management. We have to make this move. There's transition phases. We've applied. We're waiting to hear when we're going to start. But everyone has to be implemented and transitioned by April 1 of 2026. I bring this forward because this may impact our funding levels for some homes. The ministries advised us that there could be an impact should data be used to inform the nursing and personal care envelope. They've advised also there'll be a temporary freeze on our case mix index for transitioning homes as they continue their discussions with the sector on future options. So we're taking this very seriously. We haven't got a date yet, but we're already engaging and trying to reach out to homes that have transitioned and to the vendors to try and prepare as best we can and hopefully maintain our CMI. I've put Terrace Lodge redevelopment. It's not new, but it's exciting because we're coming to completion and occupancy. So this would be part of the service excellence and efficiency strategy. And we'll be looking at resident and family satisfaction survey, improved metrics, and of course, maintaining more than 97% bed occupancy. And as residents transition from the home, we'll have opportunity to increase our revenue with more private rate beds. Initiative number 8 is also a mandated initiative. You'll recall, or some of you may recall, back in 2022, we received the mandate by March 31st, 2025, that every long-term care home must meet the 4 hours of care per resident per day requirement. We're March 31st of 2024, it was 3 hours and 42 minutes. And so back in 2022, there was a lot of discussion with council about what that, how we would increase the hours over the course of the year. There'd be a couple of times each year where we would increase our nursing hours. And so we've been working away at that. I'm excited to say that we did not require to implement as many hours as we had originally thought, because there's some additional pieces that we were not aware were going to be included, such as orientation and training and those pieces. So we've done well, and there's a savings within the 2025 budget that will reflect those changes. Our current status, we fluctuate across the homes anywhere between 3.49 to 4.1. And so we've got a planned final increase in hours in the first quarter to support ensuring we get to the 4 hours of care. So the metrics there again would be having more staff. We're going to have resident and family satisfaction survey improved metrics, and of course, staffing survey metrics and key performance indicator metrics improvements.
Michelle, could I just a question? So when you're challenged with filling all the shift, is that hindering this process at all? I'm sure it is.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Warden. So yes, absolutely, because there's been times when we have to do the staffing report with finance every 3 months. And so there's times where we're like, we're not as high as what we thought we would be, or yep, that makes sense because we know we've had some trouble over the summer with shift replacement, those types of things. So absolutely. And then there's other times where we thought we would be lower. But when we have one-to-one staffing, those hours actually count towards it, and we actually get reimbursed for those if we've done the correct process for reimbursement. So some things that help us and some things that sort of deter our progress as we work towards the 4 hours. I'm confident with the increase we discussed with finance that we'll be successful. Okay, next slide. This is back in 2022, the ministry provided what's called hiring more nurse practitioners funding. And we had some discussion, and at that time it was felt the funding wasn't sufficient to support recruitment and retention of a nurse practitioner. In November of 2024, the ministry increased that funding by 21%. So we are now looking to pursue the implementation of one nurse practitioner to support resident care and services across the 3 homes. And so this role will support direct care. The nurse practitioner would collaborate and communicate with the physicians and with the nursing staff and the residents and the families. They would receive referrals and be able to make referrals. They'd be able to order and review some of the diagnostics and complete assessments and work very closely with the hospital for just discharge planning. And support. Another part of the role has to be 30% around education and quality. So we'll support our homes with the quality improvement plans, with the implementation of our clinical pathways and evidence-based and mandatory programs across the homes. So this is something we are looking for support for. I will point out that the funding is request-based. So we would need to do a job posting and make a job offer. And within that job offer, make it clear that there's a provision subject to Ministry of Long-Term Care approval. And so once that's approval was received, you have 4 weeks to sign off on the job offer. So I just wanted to share that with council as well.
Go ahead, Councilor Noble.
Through you, Warden. So with that position, who's doing that kind of work now, Michelle? Would that be a doctor?
Through you, Mr. Warden, to Councilor Noble, correct. It'd be a combination of the physician and the nurse, depending on the scope of practice of what the task was.
And so that doctor would be 100% paid by the province?
We pay on-call fees and medical director fees that we are funded through from the Ministry of Long-Term Care. And then they bill OHIP for resident services.
Okay, I just wanted to shed light on that. Thank you.
The other point I wanted to make here is if we have difficulty recruiting within the budget, so it's got a 21% increase. There is the ability, if there's room within our allied health professional funding budget, to look and see if there's an opportunity to enhance that wage to attract and recruit. The next slide. So what are the resources needed to successfully complete this plan? So the education lead and coordinator role, again, supporting recruitment and retention, onboarding, student placements, coaching programs, and all the mandatory and legislative items. We actually did a very good working session with finance, and we were able to find the monies through the allied health professional funding from the ministry. So there would be no increase to the budget. It can be supported through that fund. The increase in nursing hours to support achieving and maintaining the 4 hours of care. Again, the direct care funding that the province has provided will cover all of those costs with one exception. At Elgin Manor, it was identified that we needed to increase the RPN hours, 56 hours biweekly, and that comes at a cost of $73,000, but all of the other hours are covered through the direct care funding. The technological software implementation and the training. We have what's called integrated technology solution funding. So the majority of those costs are funded through that pot of money. And the training attached to it is we have some one-time funding that we can utilize for training. The dietary software and one-time hardware costs for the meal suite technology is not currently covered. That'll come at a cost of $55,000. but it will really streamline processes and ensure accuracy of meals and textures at each serving. But the training of the staff can be funded through the one-time funding. Next slide. I've spoke today about some training and implementation. And so I've spoke about the inter-RI and the clinical pathways, mental health, leadership. All of those costs this year can be covered through one-time funding. The scheduling software, both the scheduling options and the attendance management system, we've had some great discussions with the vendor, and those costs are going to be part of our agreement, so there's no cost there. The nurse practitioner, again, I spoke about that through the hiring my nurse practitioners and or the allied health professional funding. And then I just wanted to remind this committee that the SEIU collective agreement did expire in December 31st, 2024. And we are just awaiting our HR recruitment process to then start setting some dates for negotiations. And our own arbitration outcome remains pending. Next slide. So the Terrace Lodge redevelopment project, funding from the ministry did include some funding for moving residents. It was enough to cover phase 1. Phase 2, we covered off through the operational budget last year. Looking at this year, there's still monies within the one-time funding that we can utilize to support the costs for phase 3. And I will point out it's going to be 2 moves because most of the residents are going to need to move just from the logistics of the project. Also with the new build comes some additional costs. So we have 84 single rooms and with their own room, their own washroom. And then we have 16 residents have their own room, but share a washroom. So each of those rooms has a ceiling lift and a track. So the cost for the service agreement is $52,000. So that's a new cost. And then the amortization costs, which Jen spoke about earlier, noted there. And I did want to point out that back in December of 2018, if anyone was here, we had a feasibility study presentation to council on whether we would do a new building or do an addition and renovation. And so there was an annual operating cost analysis between those 2 choices. And within that, it was known that by taking the renovation and addition approach, we would need additional housekeeping hours. So at the completion of the project, that's when we would need to implement those. And so that's 42 hours per week at a cost of $76,000. And all of the other homes priorities were able to be captured by maintaining current staffing levels and year over year budget amounts. So before you, this slide is the 2025 Beaubier Villa proposed budget. You will see the 2024 budget and then the 2024 actuals and the 25 budget with the change from 24 to 25. On the left-hand side is the total operating and capital. And what we are left with is a $46,890 increase for Beaubier Villa for 2025. The information bulleted below outlines increases in revenue and additional expenses and changes in capital.
May I?
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Sloan.
Thank you. Through you, Warden, to Michelle. It looks like an extra $1 million for wages and benefits from 2024 actuals to the proposed budget of 2025. Now, I know it only goes to December 19th, but if you look at the others, it's probably not more than 10%. So can you help me understand the increase, please?
I'm sorry, I'll just lean on Jen for a second.
So even if it was 5.8, if we gave 10%, 5.7, 5.8, you've still got 6.6. And I don't think the number of beds have changed, have they? Just curious, thank you.
Are you looking at revenue? Sorry, Counselor Sloan, I'm not exactly sure which line you're looking at.
Wages and benefits, please.
Wages and benefits, okay.
So the second line refers to 554,000 wage placeholder for increases and step increases. That includes the education coordinator and the nurse practitioner role. That's the line you're referring to, Counselor Sloan? Sorry.
Yes, with respect to what I don't understand is so that the nurse practitioner, you've got an extra 600,000 wage placeholder increase, step increases in funded nurse practitioner role. So the actuals for 2024 without the increase were almost $1 million less than what's forecast for 2025. And is
Oh,
that
yeah.
just for that home, or I just don't understand how the $1 million is can go through to one home.
At this time, when we're looking at these wages and benefits and expenses, they're as of December 19th. So the
Or
full
the-
year salary is not in there yet. So we're giving you the actuals as of December 19th.
And I realize that, but there's no way that they could be more than 10% if you look at the rest of the actuals versus the budget. So again, we have $1 million extra for one home on wages and benefits. I just want to be clear. It's December the 19th, the date that it's come through. Even if we add 10% to the 5,629,000, that takes us to 5.7, and you're asking for 6.3. So I'll give you the benefit of another 100,000 even, and that's 800,000 extra for 2025 from how it's read on this document.
At this time, I have not got an answer for you directly, but I can look into that. At this time, there is not all of the year-end actuals and accruals in there. So we would be doing accruals up to December 31st for wages. Also, there was a significant increase in wages this year. So we would have an accrual that we would be doing for that at year end.
I don't understand, but thank you.
Continue on, please.
Okay. The next slide is Elgin Manor. And on the left-hand side, you'll see the total operating budget with capital. And the budget change is the 266,000. I did mention earlier, 73,000 of that is in relation to the RPN hour increase. And we've got at the bottom of the chart there, some revenues that have increased and revenue that's decreased. Again, the wage placeholder step increases, infection prevention and control. Education coordinator is not listed there, but it's included. Oh, funding nurse practitioner rule. Under wage benefits and decrease, you'll see that for Elgin Manor and Terrace Lodge that we did not need to implement the full number or the allotted ESW hours. So that's a savings there, but we did need to increase the RPN costs.
Go ahead, Councilor Nova.
Through you, Warden, I think there too, we need to identify that the budgeted and the actual, or the actual and from 2024 and the budgeted is almost $2 million increase. We're going from 8.3 million to 10.24. So like if we're seeing these increases, we kind of need to know, like, that's a huge increase. And that's just the two homes. I haven't scrolled down to the next one and see, but at the same time, I think I realize there's increases, but these ones are.
Go ahead, Jen.
So from 2023 to 2024, our increases in wages in the homes was 2%. In 2023 to 2024, it was 4%. So that gives us a 6% increase over the 2 years. The actual wage that was awarded to the staff was 7%. So we're now going up an additional percentage for potential increase in 2025. Plus, we're taking into account that additional 1% increase that we're short. So we need to accommodate the budget in order to do that. We did do the accruals, but we did not do the budget. So that's why there is a large increase.
Yeah, but go ahead, Counselor Sloan.
How many beds are at, through you, Warden, how many beds are at Elgin Manor, please?
Through you, Mr. Warden, to Counselor Sloan, 90 beds at Elgin Manor.
Okay, so if you look at this and just the million on this one divided by 90 beds, we're skewing these numbers that we talked about earlier into the Councillor Noble's comment. I don't think you can say that when the actuals as of December the 19th are 8,376,000 and the budget is 9,130, that it's going to go over budget. So if we have $9,130,000 and we're going to $10,240,000, it's still an increase of $1 million added to the last home of the $500,000. So that's per bed, if my calculations are right, a fair bit. And I don't think that we fully understand what that is. And I just want to make that note for the record that we're talking about $28,000 per bed. And then we have an increase here specifically in wages and benefits next year to the tune of $1 million. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Warden, to Councillor Sloan, we budget for what we need, not for the actual. So if there is a surplus in the year, that ends up being a surplus because we had vacancies or shortfall in filling those positions. Now, Michelle has already mentioned that she's had some recruitment and retention issues. So it's very possible that by the time we get to year end, there will be a surplus, but we cannot budget for 85% of wages. So that's really the answer.
I guess we're not going to finalize this today, obviously. Is there a possibility of coming back with a spreadsheet to try and follow through the process? Deputy Warden, go ahead.
Yep. In addition, Mr. Warden, Jen, that 7% wage settlement through the negotiations, that takes effect 2025, correct? No? Did it take effect 24?
It took effect in 23. So they were 2 years behind. Yes. Sorry. Yes, so we're catching up, plus we're also accommodating the new percentage. Sorry.
Okay, continue on.
Thank you. The next slide is Terrace Lodge. And on the left-hand side, you'll see the total operating capital at 1.27 and the budget change of 322,449. Again, as of December 19th. And I mentioned earlier, 250,000 of that is amortization and 52,000 for the ceiling lift contracts. Or sorry, it actually became 38.7 because there were some decreases in some other agreements. So the 52 became 38.7. And we have the same wage place holders and step increases and funded roles. Again, at both Algon Manor and Terrace Lodge, we had the savings of not needing to implement the full hours that we had planned for in 22 for PSWs.
Further questions on Michelle's? Go ahead, Deputy Warden.
I'm sorry, Michelle, wages and benefits decreased to just PSW hours down 0.8. What is that?
So back in back in 2022, we did an analysis of how many hours we would need to increase for PSWs, and we did not need to increase that number. So there's a significant savings at both Alga Manor and Terrace Lodge in PSW hours. We, through the staffing report submissions, we were unaware in 2022 that all the extensive training that we do and the new hire orientations, all of those pieces actually count towards the direct care hours of the 4 hours. So there's a significant savings there. Correct. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Any other questions for Michelle on her part of the budget? If not, thank you. Councilor Noble, go ahead.
Sorry, through you, Warden. I'm just trying to comprehend the conversation Deputy Warden had. So if there is a savings of 800,000 in 2024, that savings doesn't cross over to 2025. It actually costs us about that much money. I'm just trying to comprehend that line item where it says net operating. We got 800,000 in brackets, and then for the budgeted for 2024, we have 932,000 for Algon Manor. We had a savings on the 1 year, and then the next year we're actually spending about that much. Something I missed there.
Through you, Mr. Warden, to Councilor Noble. So you're looking at, net operating for Alga Manor, 2024 actuals versus 2025 proposed budget. Sorry, this goes back to Jen's point earlier that we have a lot of, and the question earlier as well, where we do have shifts that we're unable to fill. So there can be a savings, but we budget based on anticipating to have full complement. So the 932,000 is what we should be budgeting for based on what we anticipate and hope to have for a staffing complement.
In addition to this, it's of note that if we do not spend our direct care funding or we do not spend our one-time funding, we don't get to keep it to supplement the next year. That goes back to the ministry. So whatever you're seeing here as a surplus or deficit, it's not something that we get to keep and reuse. So focusing on the actuals is not really helping you at this point. It's just there for information purposes to show you that we are, relatively on track for those numbers. But if we don't meet, if we go over those targets, we have to pay. But if we go under those targets and we save money, the ministry gets their money back. That's how it works.
Go ahead, Councilor Noble.
Through you, Warden. So, like that's an increase of $2 million there, right? Like from 1 year to the other. like I realize the 1 year we've saved 800,000, but to go from actuals from 2024 to budgeted, I just think it's good to note that that's a $2 million increase. Thank you.
And as mentioned, we will bring back some better information for this department in really relative to the actuals. So we'll get those accruals done and try to bring that forward for better information.
Okay, so anything further from Michelle's presentation? Not seeing anything, so thank you, Michelle. We'll continue on. Peter, if you're ready for your part, go ahead when you're.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden, through you to the rest of the council and the Budget Committee. So first of all, I've highlighted some key successes through engineering services, through the transportation aspect of our department. We completed the reconstruction of St. George Street. Only the top lift of asphalt remains for 2025. We rehabilitated a total of 28 kilometers of road that included Putnam Road, Dexter Line, John Wise Line, Lyons Line, Union Road, and Chatham Street in Port Burwell. And when we rehabilitate a road, that's referring to Colden Place asphalt recycling and hot mix paving and new granular shoulders. We also advanced the asset management plan to include all county department assets, and we're on track to meet the requirements on Ontario Regulation 588-17. There's more work this year to establish levels of service with asset management as the final component of that regulation. We restarted work to develop the county's first ever transportation master plan. That will be completed in the summer of 25, and I will be reporting to council in the coming months on some key initiatives to advance that plan. We've issued, developed, and awarded a number of RFPs for the design and construction administration of projects and initiatives that we're going to be completing this year. And that included Fingal reconstruction, Glen Erie line slope rehabilitations, the King Bridge, in which council awarded the tender today, as well as multiple bridge rehabilitation, and the engineering work is well underway on those projects as well. So for 2025, we continue on with our delivery of capital investments, and our target is to keep those on budget and on schedule, as we always do. And we like to manage the infrastructure investments at the lowest life cycle cost, and that's a metric that we use in order to calculate our success measures. We not only have to worry about what we have today, but most recently, and this has only been happening the last few years, we're really getting growth in the region, and we have a number of growth infrastructure projects that are finally in front of us. So when we consider our asset management plan, we developed that 10-year capital plan that you see in front of you. We are not only looking back at the asset's age and condition and traffic volume, we look forward to collision experience and what we need to do. For example, the Fingal reconstruction project has been an identified need for a very long time. We waited to time that to coordinate with the local municipalities' requirement for servicing in the roadway. And so we look forward to make sure that we invest in our assets collaboratively with other servicing needs. So for the 2025 summary, we're recommending 54 kilometers of road resurfacing, and that'll be in the form of either asphalt resurfacing, surface treatment, or microsurfacing. 23 kilometers of road rehabilitation. Again, that's adding, we're diving down into the existing asphalt structure there, rehabilitating it and resurfacing it with hot mix and new shoulders. We have those 4 bridges that we're planning on rehabilitating. Mapleton is currently underway right now because Belmont Road will serve as the detour route for the King Bridge replacement. So we're trying to schedule and coordinate those projects. We'll also be working on Gillette's Bridge, Players Bridge, and Eden Bridge. We are underway for an engineering assignment for the Port Burwell Bridge deck replacement. That requires a bit more engineering work, so that one's being deferred out of this year's program until we fully understand what the project will entail, with an options report that we're waiting on from the consultant. We will be replacing one bridge, that's King Bridge that we spoke about earlier. Glen Erie Line requires 8 slope rehabilitations. We've just received a first report from our consultant PlanMac, who are identifying some novel methods in order to maintain those slopes permanently without simply flattening them out, because we have some issues with existing utilities, a creek bed on the bottom, and land that we don't currently own. We also are going to see some new traffic signals at the intersection of Ron McNeil Line and Dalewood Road. We've been monitoring an ongoing collision history likely triggered by growth in the region, and that collision warrant was met last year. So we are currently out for engineering services, and we hope to have traffic signals at that intersection implemented before year's end. There's a map on the next page that showcases these projects. You can see we have a busy year in front of us across the county. There is one resurfacing project identified here that was originally part of the plan on Sparta Line, which we've now deferred until later on into the program. In discussions with staff from the municipality of Central Elgin, there may be servicing installed on that section of roadway to support future servicing of the Union Settlement area. So we've deferred that road resurfacing project until the future. We hate to dig up new asphalt. So we've also identified a second business initiative, and specifically this is a web-based permit application process. Currently we use Laserfiche forms, and you can access this through the website. However, the existing system requires numerous steps and touch points by staff. So we want to modernize this process. We want to use a system that other communities have implemented, a web-based, cloud-based solution where it will leverage and build upon the success we've had with the municipal 511 mapping. So users can simply point on a map where their identified project is. Most of the time, this is driveways, for example. We facilitate 300 moving and road occupancy permits annually, and we expect that a system like this will be a much better user experience. Just for council's information right now, when we approve these permits, we manually scan these and send them to the local municipality so they know that the county has approved this project. So if the local road supervisor or staff are going down the road and they see some activity, they want to make sure that the county staff is aware of this activity. So that manual process can now be all cloud-based. So everybody will have access to a map. They'll see all the points where all the approved permits exist, or maybe where moving permits or oversized, overweight moves are scheduled. So we expect this to be not only useful for the user, the applicant, but also for staff and local staff to understand where we've approved all these permits. The system fees for this application are $25 per application. We currently charge between $200 and $500 for our permits, depending on what type of permit it is. So right now we're expecting to realize staff efficiencies to offset those costs. So we're gonna, once we implement this, we'll have some experience with it. And if it makes sense to increase those permit fees to cover this $25, we will. But right now we're gonna bake that into the permit fees because we think we're going to realize some additional efficiencies.
If I may, Mr. Warden. Peter, yes, you're telling me there's no upfront cost for this particular implementation?
That's correct. Through you, Mr. Warden, to Deputy Warden Ketchabah, there's no upfront cost for this. The next slide is a summary of the proposed 2025 budget. You'll note that there is a lesser capital expense this year. We try to keep an even spend throughout the 10 years, but obviously that does fluctuate up and down. You'll note that the road maintenance allocations have been increased by the October CPI as per the RMA, and that increases the operating cost by $78,000. And that's the transportation budget in front of you. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have before I move on to facilities.
Questions around the table? Councillor Sloan, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you, Warden, to Peter. Great presentation, Peter. Very interesting. Quick question about the stoplight at the corner of Dalewood and Ron McNeil. You were very good. I know that the constituents out there have been very aggressive, and as there have been some valid concerns with the accidents that have happened. For my personal information, and you know, you can always answer these for me, and you're very good to to put up with my questioning, a roundabout versus a stop light. Just on a, in the aggregate, they talk about, like I see on St. Thomas, they've done 2 on Highbury, cost, long-term business plan. If you wouldn't mind just a couple of minutes on the difference, please, and thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you. So I think we all are becoming more and more familiar with roundabouts. They've been around for decades, predominantly in Europe, and they're gaining a lot more attraction and attention around here. They do reduce the severity of collisions, but they do not reduce the number of collisions. I've heard anecdotally that there are a number of recent collisions at the new roundabouts that were recently constructed in the city of St. Thomas. Roundabouts, although they reduce the severity of collisions, operating costs, you'd think they would save in the electricity that are used for signalized intersections. In fact, the number of luminaires that are required around to fully service the lighting levels of a roundabout are equal. So the electrical costs are the same operationally. Snow plowing can be another operating challenge for roundabouts. As plows enter and exit the roundabout, they have to do so in a coordinated manner. Finally, there's a space requirement. So the intersection of Dalewood and Ron McNeil, we have a hydro tower line on the east side of that intersection, which we have just gone out for solicitation of engineering services for the design of the signals there. We're expecting some potential challenges simply by facilitating signal mass and illumination. That's why the beacons that are installed at that location are mounted on top of the stop signs and not an overhead intersection beacon, because we had previous challenges due to the close proximity of the hydro. So my point there being is you need a much larger footprint to accommodate a roundabout. And finally, and likely most importantly, is a similar volume of the minor and major roadway. You should have at least a 70 and a 30 volume split. Otherwise, you are unnecessarily inconveniencing the vehicles and drivers on the main road because they're having to navigate the roundabout. If you get a better of a split, then everybody is treated as an equal and everybody is afforded a safe movement around the roundabout. There's cost. Roundabout probably 10 times the cost of a signalized intersection. So if we're budgeting $500,000 for signals there, we'd be at least $4 million for a roundabout. The one at Centennial and Elm, which is a much smaller footprint, was $3.5 million.
Okay, I think you can continue on, Peter.
Thank you. Facilities, corporate facilities. So key successes in the last year. We, as Michelle had mentioned earlier, we completed the phase 2 in the occupancy, and we began phase 3. So that's very exciting. The county administration building, we saw our elevator and accessibility project commissioned. And next, we onboarded 2 new facilities team members. Now, this is important because we replaced retired full-time employees, and those employees left with a vast amount of knowledge. They were long-term employees, many decades, and they knew the nuances of how those facilities reacted. So it's a learning process when you bring in new people to fill those positions. We replaced 5 major HVAC rooftop units, 4 at Elgin Manor and 1 at Terrace Lodge. We replaced all of the faucets and toilets in the residence rooms in Elgin Manor. That facility is now 30 years old, so it's taking a little more upkeep and repair and maintenance. And finally, we had 2 new power generators installed, one at our POA facility over here and one at the ambulance base on Edward Street. Moving forward to 2025, I've identified a couple initiatives here, and one is an increase in maintenance staff complement by 0.5 FTE. Currently, we only have 1 maintenance person at the administration building and 1 at each of our homes, so we have 4 in total. They only work 8 hours a day. Homes are operational 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. our maintenance staff time only accounts for about a fifth of that time, about 22%. We actually have a maintenance person available. We're finding that with turnover of staff, this maintenance person is very important at the facility. And if we have a long weekend or a time when they're away, we do our best to try to rotate staff when people are away or sick or on vacation time, but it always leaves a gap somewhere. Somebody is moving and someone's not somewhere else. So what we're finding is after weekend shifts, for example, there's a stack of work orders that the maintenance person has to get to on a Monday. We were relying more and more after hours on contractors to address things. But if we just had a maintenance person to help cover the weekends and to cover for vacation time of the other maintenance or sick time of the other maintenance staff, we believe we could realize some efficiencies in operations, improve the resident care. Michelle had also mentioned about the footprint at Terrace Lodge. We've increased that footprint by 38%. And that feasibility or operations analysis study we completed in 2018 identified housekeeping needs. It didn't go as far as identifying maintenance needs, but it should have. We've increased that footprint by 38%. Our other facilities are aging. So we actually believe we need more than half a maintenance person, but we want to have that experience for some time and then see if we can manage with the additional 0.5 FTE. So that's one initiative. The second one is the final phase of a multi-year, multi-phase construction project here at the administration building. We've renovated these beautiful council chambers. We have brand new elevators for accessibility. The final step is replacing the existing windows in the exterior brick facade, which is leaking. I think we've all experienced today, we probably don't have the best energy efficiency with these windows. We have 500 windows in this building also, which is a number that every time I say it out loud, you try to look outside and count them. There's a lot of windows to replace. Council will receive very shortly, within the next month, a fulsome presentation on what options look like. Our consultant is actively working on, do we just build upon that existing facade or do we strip a layer of brick and actually put it back on there? It's not an inexpensive project, but it's one necessary to maintain this place for the next generation. So you will see baked into the budget a total estimated cost. I believe we're using some project efficiencies that we had a surplus from the elevator project to offset the $5.3 million anticipated costs for a new facade and replacing the windows. And like I said, council will have a fulsome opportunity to look at artist renderings on, do we want this to get a modern feel to match the POA with some type of cladding, or do we want to retain the historic look of the existing building? And council will have those options before them. Some other noteworthy investments is we are completing our building condition assessments at all of our facilities. We have 11 county-owned facilities, and those BCAs help inform our 10-year capital plan. They identifying the existing condition of all the mechanical systems within those buildings, and then we can make the appropriate investment recommendations to council. And finally, for the Terrace Lodge redevelopment project, the scope did not include treatment to the balconies, existing electrical components, the basement corridor, the adult day program, concrete, and the outside staff break area. So in order to finalize the project at Terrace Lodge, an additional $335,000 is required to include work in this scope that wasn't included in the original Terrace Lodge redevelopment scope. So the next 3 pages are budget summaries for 4 of those facilities, the administration building and 3 of the homes. I would be pleased to answer any questions that you may have in regards to.
Go ahead.
Peter, thank you very much for that presentation. Give us a little more detail. What do you mean by treatment? A $335,000 treatment. What does that entail?
Through you, Mr. Warden, to Deputy Warden Ketchabaugh. From what I understand is some of those balconies are spalling. So we need to maybe do an epoxy treatment, something to protect them because they're disintegrating.
Any other, Councilor Whitner, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Warden. Through to Peter. Peter, with his windows, 500 windows, I guess. Do you see any grant opportunities available out there to help us with some of this cost?
We will absolutely explore to see if there's any grant opportunities. I know of none right now. This is a bit of a unique building because we only occupy about a third of it. We have 13 tenants, including the municipality of Central Elgin.
Oh, Blaine, go ahead.
Thank you, Warden. Through you to Councillor Widner, just further to Peter's comments with respect to grants. There are usually a number of grants with respect to energy efficiency and creating buildings that are more energy efficient or have a lower carbon footprint. Usually you'll find most of the exclusions speak to administrative buildings. So if it was a library or a recreational facility or something like that, they fall within the grant program guidelines. Most administrative type facilities usually are excluded. But as Peter mentioned, we will do our best to determine if there are any grants that we do can consider.
Go ahead, Peter.
Just one more point for council's information. While we're looking at options that the consultant is presenting to us for facade treatment and windows, we're looking at a life cycle cost, not only to include the cost over the duration, how long, what's going to last, but we're also reflecting upon our current energy usage, looking what the R value may be if we choose a certain type of system. So council will be able to see what maybe the operating efficiencies and the reduced carbon footprint looks like, because that ties directly to the cost and the solution they choose.
So to Blaine's point, Brian's library staff get a nice warm building at a cheaper cost than we do here. Any other questions?
Please.
Councillor Sloan, go ahead.
Thank you, Warden. Through you to Peter. Last summer, I sent an email to Blaine and it had to do with the building improvements at that point. And I'm paraphrasing here. And if this is in the details, some of it I may have missed, please indulge me. At that point, there had been a building rehabilitation plan of approximately $12 million. And as I recall, about 9 of it had been spent. That was as of August 2024. Is the $5 million in addition to this is my first question, please?
The $5 million is included within that total administration building renovation project, and the total will be close to that original budget figure.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Peter? Councillor Whitner, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. If I could back up for a couple of things here. The roundabout, you said the collisions are no better, but are the fatalities typically down with roundabouts?
Absolutely. Through you, Warden Jones, to Councillor Widner. Absolutely. So it's the severity that is improved with roundabouts. The number of collisions may not necessarily go down, but the severity of the collisions are expected to decrease with roundabouts. Absolutely.
Okay, that's good information. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no further questions, we'll move down to Planning and Land Division. Matt, you're up.
Thank you very much. Through the warden to our finance committee. I'm going to be running through our planning 2025 budget today, starting off with some key department successes. So as you know, our department is relatively new. This year we hired a planning director, myself, a senior planner, and a planning administrator, and that makes up our base team now for the county. We provide services for reviewing subdivision applications, official plan amendments, and we've been commenting on quite a few applications across our LMPs. This year, we've also adopted a new official plan, and we've put that through a conformity exercise with the 2024 provincial policy statement, which, as you'll remember, was released in October of last year. We've developed a new planning fee structure as well, which will greatly benefit the viability of the department in the future. And in terms of numbers, we processed 96 consent applications, 3 draft plans of subdivision, 1 subdivision red line, 2 draft plan approval extensions, 4 official plan amendments at the local level, and 25 pre-consultation meetings. I am expecting those numbers to increase this year because things seem to be increasing a little bit in terms of activity. In particular, I'm expecting quite a few more pre-consultation meetings. We have developed a pre-consultation process, or we're still developing that process, and I'm going to speak a little bit more to that in this presentation. Next slide, please. So in overall, we have 8 initiatives that we're going to be working towards in this year's budget. The first one, of course, is to begin work with 1 to 3 of our local municipal partners. We are speaking with some of those councils in the near future. In terms of strategic priority, this is covered under service excellence and efficiency. And we'll be providing quarterly performance reports on the number of planning applications, inquiries, and also the active policy planning projects and financial expenses and revenues. So we'll be looking at the cost to the LMP for the service rendered versus revenue generated through local planning fees. Of course, the county's planning department is not looking to make money, and we also are trying our best not to lose money. So if we could come in at sort of that 0 budget line item, that would be great. And we'll also be performing biannual user experience surveys to ensure that we are providing excellent service delivery. Our second initiative, as I mentioned, we're in the process of developing a new pre-consultation process for the county and our LMPs. Yeah, got one. Thanks, Phil. There was a pre-submission consultation process in the past, but I'll be honest, it was a little bit all over the place, a little scattered in how it was being implemented. So we'll be looking to establish a pretty consistent approach at how we review applications and how we consult with applicants. To start things off, we're developing that process at the county level. So anything related to applications that we process and review and bring either to land division or to yourselves, we have implemented pre-consultation requirements for consent applications, which would be a minor pre-consultation, and for subdivisions and county level OPAs, which would go through our regular pre-consultation process. Again, this is a service excellence and efficiency strategic priority, and we'll be tracking the number of pre-con meetings and how many of them become applications. So it's important that we're providing our applicants with as much information as we can so that they can make an informed decision of whether or not they would like to move forward with their applications. And we'll also be tracking the timing, making sure that, you know, we're not scheduling these meetings too far out. I've noticed there's a pretty high expectation in the county, which is good, at submitting these pre-consultation requests and having a quick turnaround time for when they're scheduled. And that's something that we'll be keeping a close eye on. And we'll be issuing and reviewing user experience surveys for pre-consultation participants, again, to make sure that they're having a good experience going through that process. Next slide, please. Our third initiative is to initiate a Development Industry Information Group, or our DIG. This is something that we've heard from council and from our partners in the industry that they would like established. And the idea here is under our strategic priority, a collaborative engagement and communication. We're going to be facilitating quarterly meetings with the development industry, which is our development industry professionals, our LMP staff, any key development stakeholders. And the idea is to really improve communication and disseminate information to improve regional development standards. So we won't just be reporting on the things that are happening at the county level, but we also be looking to our LMPs, professional staff, to be participating in those meetings as well. And we have had a conversation with our LMP planning departments in that regard. We'll be conducting an annual survey to determine the effectiveness of this group and canvass opinion for making improvements to the meetings. So I can see these meetings being mostly in person if we can. It would be something that would probably rotate around the county to make sure that we get to all parts of the county for these meetings. But it may, we also may be able to do them online as well, depending on the weather, of course. The next initiative is to improve planning application forms and our planning website. This is another one of those things that needs a little bit of work. The application itself, we have various versions of it that we are going to be consolidating into one application process that will be available online. The idea is to develop an online application form and modernize and simplify the application requirements and submission. This will kind of come hand in hand with our pre-consultation requirements. We want to integrate this new application form into a planning department webpage. So one of the things that we're asking for is a little bit of money to help develop this. It would be kind of like a choose your own adventure type thing. You would select the type of application you wanted, and then based on that selection, it would bring you to the next prompt, which would be the type of things you would need to include in that submission. And again, all of these things would come out during the pre-consultation meeting. But the idea is to really increase the user experience to make it very easy for people to make applications. This is something that we would be rolling out at the county level, and then if there's interest at the LMP level, we could definitely help and engage those planning departments to help them develop that as well. And again, to ensure that it's working well, we'll be conducting reoccurring surveys just to make sure that the efficiency and effectiveness of those changes are being met. Next slide, please. The next initiative is to develop and standardize conditions of approval and development agreement templates for subdivisions, consent applications, and site plans. Now, the first two are something that we would have more control over. Subdivision consents are done at the county level. Site plans, that's something we would develop if we were involved at the LMP level. Again, this is under service excellence and efficiency. And we would create these conditions of approval and development agreement templates. And this would really help to speed up our approval process for subdivision consents and site plan applications. This can sometimes be one of those sticking features where you almost get to you get near the end of a process, and then all of a sudden, like having to go through that development agreement really slows things down because there's a lot of back and forth and conversation and what gets included in these agreements or in conditions. So the hope would be we would go out, canvas the requirements of our LMPs and create a standard list of conditions so that when we get to the end, this is something that's very easy to add in at the end. Everybody's on board with it, and it just speeds up that last part of this process. We would track the timing of application submissions and application approval to make sure that these changes are being effective at shortening our timing of each of the applications. Next slide. Okay. This is the next initiative is something that I've brought up kind of from time to time, and we just recently had a conversation with our LMP planning departments about it, and that is the review and proposed consent application delegated authority. Again, service excellence and efficiency is what we're looking for, and there are municipalities across Ontario that have implemented this. We would explore the possibility of delegating approval authority to county planning staff to approve non-contentious land division applications to accelerate the approval process for applicants who comply with zoning provisions. And non-contentious would be exactly that. A consent application that would not require something like a minor variance or a zoning bylaw amendment. It already conforms and complies with all of your policies. It's just really a matter of going through the steps. So under this new process, those non-contentious applications would just simply be reviewed by staff, and staff would have authority to make those approvals. And of course, this is all up to council, and this is something that I would bring forward to council for consideration at a future date after I've done a little bit more research. But the idea is to really speed up that process for some applicants who are sticking to the rules and are hoping to get things done quickly. We would track applications to make sure that the time is being saved and resources are being saved. And we would prepare an annual report summarizing the findings and tracking that consent data. Okay, the next one relates to the initiation and implementation of a growth management strategy and servicing allocation policy. And this is something that this group and our growth planning steering committee has talked a little bit about. It's something that I think is important for the county to do and for our LMPs to understand. And it's something that we could help to at least initiate the process. Of course, this is something that we would need buy-in from the LMPs to do because a lot of that information would be coming from them. But in collaboration with our LMPs, we would collect development data and development growth management and develop a growth management strategy and servicing allocation policies that looks at growth patterns of current and future servicing needs. This is something that I see we really need in the county because while there are some LMPs moving ahead with servicing their own jurisdictions, there are other deficiencies across the county. And maybe through some of those projects, we could look at like how can we service other areas of the county and how could we all kind of work together to make that to work a little bit better. The success of that, of course, would be participation from the LMPs and the ability to provide data on various development metrics. Again, this initiative is really based on what council would like to do with growth management and with servicing master plan and how we implement that in the future. So I'm sure there'll be a little discussion about this one. And the next one, please. Initiative 8. Conduct or aid our LMP official plan conformity review exercise in relation to the 2024 PPS. So this is something we've already done with our adopted official plan. West Elgin has already done this with their most recent approved official plan, but a lot of the LMPs will need to go through this conformity exercise as well. This is something the county could help with. We are hoping through the budget to be able to hire a senior policy planner, and that's something that they would be tasked with helping our LMPs get through. And the success would be measured with the approval of each of the LMP's official plans before the end of 2025. Next slide, please. So to make this happen through our budget, we are asking for one senior policy planner, and this would be their focus would really be on policy related matters, both at the county level and at the LMP level. Depending on the participation of LMPs with county planning, we'd be looking for 1 to 2 development planners, and that would be solely to work on the workload increase from the LMPs. And I should say, like, the demand for those positions would have to be there prior to us hiring them. The idea would be is we would return to county council to seek approval of hiring those positions only once the demand warrants it. We do have provision in our budget which allows us to utilize a consultant that we have on retainer to help with when we have intermediate needs for extra planning help. But we'll get to a point where the cost of using that consultant will exceed what it would cost to hire someone internally. So, and at that point, when we get to that level and there's a business case to hire someone who we've budgeted for, we would come back and we would request from council to allow us to hire that position. We're also looking for development and memberships for the planners that we have. And then again, related to the upgrades for our planning applications and overall website and communication out to the development industry, looking for $15,000 to help provide that update. The budget that has been provided for you to see here, it has been split between land division and planning, but I would ask that you try to consider them together. The land division proposed budget for 2025, as you see, it actually comes out where it looks like it's making money. But if you look at the proposed budget for planning on the next slide, you'll see that that's not quite the case for planning. So where one loses, one gains. The idea is what we're working on with our finance department is to eventually consolidate both land division and planning together so that we can consider them both at the same time. Again, we are not trying to make money. We are trying to just recover our costs. At the end of 2025, we are still costing a little more than what we're able to bring in. But as the implementation of our new planning fees comes into effect, that number keeps going down. And the idea is that number comes down until we're pretty close to zero. If at some point we find that we are coming way over, like we're making too much money, we can adjust our fees. I think that would be a fair approach to have a look at our fees at that point. But I think right now, with how we've adjusted our fees, they're fair, they're meeting industry standards. And I think we're sitting in a good spot as those get implemented over the next 3 years. So if there are any questions about any of these numbers for land division or planning, I'm happy to answer them. I think that is it for my presentation.
Thank you, Matt. Questions from council members? Deputy Warden, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Matt, I'm looking back at page 65. And just looking at your number of full-time equivalents from, is your budget based on 14.2 full-time equivalents? Or are those some errors at the top of the page? Because if you got 9.7, where are you hiding them?
They may include numbers from land division as well. We are not hiring 14 people, no. I think in total, at this point, we're only looking for, and it's very dependent on the participation of the LMPs. We're looking for a senior policy planner, 1 to 2 development planners, and a junior planner. There's also a student that we're trying to budget for as well, just because I think that's good to give students an opportunity and to get that experience. But no, 14 doesn't sound quite right. Okay.
That's okay. Essentially, it may double the size of your department depending upon need. And that's what you've budgeted for.
Yeah, it's all dependent on the workload. That's right. So if our workload goes up, we will need more people. But if the workload goes up, we are also collecting more revenue. So it does balance itself. So I'll just sort of leave with that.
Councilor Noble, go ahead.
Through you, Warden, to Matt. So for 2024, I know we took on some of the lower tier municipalities. Did we do any invoicing to them for 2024?
Through the warden to Councillor Noble, we have not yet taken on any of our LMPs. We're still in the process of looking through the agreements and just at this point talking numbers. But our hope is that, early this year we will take on and help with some of those planning departments.
Go ahead.
Through you, Warden, to Matt again. So that revenue number for the proposed budget for 2025, that would include 2 lower tiers, or because it's $613,000.
Through the warden to Councillor Noble, I believe it might be looking at 3. The idea would be by the end of this year, we would be helping with Dutton, Dunwich, West Elgin, and potentially South Wolf.
Yep.
Through your Warden, then again to Matt. So when we do that, is that going to be a yearly budgeted item for those lower tiers, or will that be an hourly rate to them? And how will we track that?
Through the warden, at this point, it is a yearly budgeted item. It is, the numbers are based on their planning activity from the year before. So it will, and we will make adjustments based on how the year goes this year. So if this year is not as busy, you can expect next year we will budget less revenue because we will be, there will not be as much work. But that year, the way it is set up right now, and keep in mind this will maybe change, is right now we're proposing a flat fee. It may end up being hourly. I can't say for sure just because we're still going through those details. Yep.
Okay, Councillor Sloan.
Thank you. Through you, Warden, to Matt. Can you help me understand? You've named 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus a summer student, which would be 6. You don't know which LMPs are starting with you, so it's already January. It takes a couple of months to hire someone. Are you asking today or telling us today that regardless, you'll be hiring 5 plus 1? Or are you going to wait and see which LMPs are planning on taking service, please?
Through the warden to Counselor Sloan, it's the latter. While we have shown what the budget would be in order to hire staff to help with the future workload, we will not be hiring anyone until there is a need to do so. So we do have some money budgeted for helping us if the workload does increase. And we will only use what has been budgeted here if there is a need for it. And we would come back to council to request the hiring of each of them. So we would not be hiring any of them right away, and we would come back for each one as we needed them.
Thank you. And just a supplementary through the warden. So back to Councillor Noble's point, if you've got a 689 for potential, you're looking at offsetting that. So 689 is not necessarily what the budget for wages and benefits will be at the end of 2025. So there's some room there, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Jiguer, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So on that note, I know it's a bit of a philosophical difference, but I know my preference for clarity would be that since as of today, as of now, there are no agreements signed, so there is no need for additional position or wages. I would prefer for the record to show and the council to approve a budget that reflects the needs that you know today. And so that way there's no misunderstanding, because sometimes we say, well, it was kind of approved, so we went ahead and recruited, and then we found out later that the revenues were not what we were, and then now we have an FTE and it gets complicated quickly. So my preference would be that for now, we take out the expected work, and then when, because you do have, we could leave that consultant that you have on a, as backup. And then when agreements are signed and you have a projection of fees, then you come back to council. And then we look at the hiring at the same time as we review the agreement. So that would be my preference.
I guess that could be a challenge if, per se, Southold, we're in the midst of talking with Matt and Blaine about this. If we chose to move ahead, it's move ahead now because of the agreement we have in place with another planner. So that would complicate things greatly if we had to come back and go through that process. The process Matt posed, I prefer over that, I think, but
If I may, Mr. Warden, I think we're talking maybe like a 2-week difference, because the people are not hired yet. And I don't think we can hire anyone until agreements are in place. And there is a consultant on retainer that would fill the gap during the recruitment process. Like, I don't know how else, like the coming to council is only a delay of 2 weeks. And the recruitment process can, and maybe 4 weeks at most. But the recruitment process could go on in parallel. I hesitate to approve a budget that actually has FTEs put in ink.
Jen, you had a comment?
My only comment to that is our new agenda process is now going to be almost 6 weeks, because we have agenda review, a council meeting, and then approval of that prior council meeting. So that for us is a 6-week period. So that does delay our process.
Even in our new procedure, there's nothing preventing items if they are urgent and have been considered previously. Like, it's not a new item. It doesn't need consultation. It can go directly to council for approval. It doesn't have to go to committee of the whole.
Thank you, Warden Jones. The idea of the committee of the whole and council agenda is only the most urgent items or items that really don't require any formal consideration of council to go directly to council. So rightfully, it should go to committee of the whole. But if I could, Warden Jones, to provide a little clarification, and respectfully, I'm not sure it matters. Because either way, it would have to come to council. Because the approach that Matt has outlined is that, and the way the budget was structured, so notwithstanding your point, Councillor Giguère, that there's no agreements in place today, this is our best estimate of what the year would look like. So when Matt and I structured the plan and the budget, my preference would be at least to show council this at this point, so that you have full knowledge of what we are anticipating the year to look like. You're right, a business plan and a budget is a snapshot in time. The snapshot right now is this is our best estimate for the year. So that's why we've included the FTEs and the potential revenue as a result of those FTEs. Why I say I'm not sure it matters is that either way, once we see the demand starting to rise, or once one of our municipal partners is on board, we start to monitor that workload. What Matt and I have talked about is we will track that very carefully. We do have a consultant on board. However, that comes at a significantly higher cost than what our own people would. So we do have to manage that very carefully. But then only when we start to see that tipping point, do we come to council and say, here is the business case to actually get the approval to hire those positions based on what we're seeing. So either way, something would have to come to council. So we will have to monitor that very closely. And I'm looking at you, Matt, because yes, you will have to be the individual with their hands on the heartbeat of that to make sure that we are monitoring that carefully. But either way, something would have to come back to council.
Councillor Noble, go ahead.
Through you, Warden. So with our new process in place and with what Councillor Giguère is speaking of, to bring on a lower tier anyways, it would still have to come to council. And if that goes through the committee of the whole and that whole process, you're extending that for another month anyways. So the full-time employee that you're hiring and all that, with this new process that we put in place today, that's going to extend that whole process by a month. New hire, not a new hire.
Deputy Warden, go. Just let
Mr. Warden, I have to excuse myself at this time.
take care. Go ahead, Deputy Warden.
Well, thank you. Yeah. What happened, Blade? Okay, well, thank you very much for, regardless of the process, from a procedural point of view. Should council or the case be made and the business case come forward that more resources are going to be required in the planning department, if you don't make provision in the plan, where's the resources to hire the planner? This is a guide. If they're, at the end of the day, you don't expend them, they're surplus. And that you just don't have to charge for them another year. Am I correct, Madam Treasurer?
Through you, Mr. Warden, to Councillor Ketchbaugh, what I see when I look at this is that there is revenue there to offset that position. So if there is no revenue, there'll be no position. So that's sort of how we are planning to work through this, that we would want to offset those costs with that revenue. So I think we are going to be very strategic about how this is implemented. And regardless, the difference between the two is about 70,000 on the budget, which is the delta that we would be working with.
Hey, is there anything further for Matt? If not, thank you, Matt. And Brian's the next victim. And I think this is probably going to be our last presentation. I think Blaine and I have another engagement at 4, so. No, can't. Okay, Brian, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Warden, and through you to the committee. Yeah, just happy to outline some of our successes for the year. 2 here that I'll comment comment on, and that is the launch of our mobile delivery service. We have a modest start to Terrace Lodge in Elgin Manor, 4 hours a week, every Wednesday. We're going to be bringing you forward some outcomes of that, of our pilot project, as to justify a more permanent footing for the service, but it's been well received, and we are very confident it'll grow into something that is valued both at our long-term care homes, and we'll see where it goes from there. Natalie, I'd also like just to highlight the stats for the year, and Natalie's going to be providing you with further details on those as well. But our circulation rates continue to grow, so we can expect more information on that. For museum and archives, for the museum, we're putting our revised collections management policy into action, leading to the deaccessioning of a number of artifacts. This is painstaking work because there's a number of considerations that we have to go through, and ultimately to either remove or transfer these items to other collections. And for archives, you can see the extent of material we have digitized and posted online in the volume of material that we've added to the collection. And this work is also continuing into 2025. As far as our 2025 business initiatives for library, we are hoping to have our expansion in West Loring completed. A little bit of a hiccup right now with the transfer of staff at West Elgin, so we haven't yet got the design build process moving yet, but I'm confident that that'll happen this year. And we are adding new functionality to our public-facing catalog in this coming year. Again, that is already provisioned within the budget before you. And hopefully we'll have a path forward on Elmer Library by the end of the year. And so I mentioned that as a 2025 budget initiative simply because of the placeholders that are going to need to exist as we go forward with the lease and furniture considerations. For a museum, we are hoping to make just further improvements to the grounds of the Heritage Center, including outdoor furnishings as part of our provincial grant project. So there'll be a concrete pad with some outdoor furnishings and adjacent to the mural in the back that then hopefully will further development of the trail project behind us as well. So, but that's a funded project. I can give the committee insight into emerging plans to move the public research area and our staff for archives to the 4th floor. The 4th floor has not had any significant modifications outside of the addition of shelving since it was first developed for museum purposes back in 2006. So we are proposing modest renovations to expand the meeting room into a research area, create at least 2 more staff work areas, painting, general TLC. You can imagine after 20 years of operating, it does need some TLC. This opportunity is now feasible due to the installation of the fully accessible elevators going to the floor. The existing space we have for archives in the basement will remain for archival storage, and we will continue our digitization activities as well from the basement space. I'm happy to arrange a tour of these facilities at any time. And I can also assure council that these modifications will be modest and will not impede an examination of future space needs for our services and other departments in the county. So this is just to kind of right now to bring we really have 3 service points right now. There's a Heritage Center, the basement, and the 4th floor. This is to bring it to 2, do some modifications, and I think a much more welcoming space on the 4th floor for archives reference. And we have capital funds to proceed with those renovations. That is a 2025 project. I've listed the 2025 budget highlights that are resulting from these initiatives, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions relating to those. And on the specifics of the budget, the one in terms of, you'll notice the notes, but all the projects we're doing beyond the 2, especially for museum and archives, the 2 full-time staff, they're revenue funded, they're donation funded. So the digitization project we're doing, that is coming from request funding we're receiving. I would like to particularly celebrate one thing, and you'll see $4,800 there for in museum budget for exhibit to our major exhibit. That is a corporate donation that we've received. And when it comes to, finding corporate donors and fundraising for those kinds of things, it's easier to fundraise for special initiatives or value added projects as opposed to core operating needs, right? So as an example, in this one, this is to develop a series of classroom kits that we can then take the exhibit that we're going to be launching this year on Jumbo and take that out into local schools. So the source of funding, and I won't reveal the source of funding yet because there's something coming up on that, allows us to develop those kits. And those are the kinds of initiatives that donors are willing to fund, when it adds value to what you're doing or where they can put their name on something, I sponsored this. So I just want to assure council that we are constantly looking for sources of revenue, and even on the digitization for archives, we happen to get a $20,000 request every year from what's called the Blidner Family Foundation to fund our digitization work. So that work is entirely donation funded. So with that, I will gladly answer any questions council might have.
Thanks, Brian, for that expedited explanation.
Hey, nothing like a deadline, and when you're in the soft service business, you learn to keep it short and sweet, right?
Appreciate that. Questions for Brian? Counselor Sloan, go ahead. Muted.
Sorry. Apologies, Warden, through the warden to Brian. I see there's an increase in the size of one of the branches in the west, which is great. I'm glad it's being used. How do you look at the other branches with respect to the potential of either increasing them? Is it all based on the real estate available? Do we look at the numbers and that kind of stuff? Or how do you gauge whether or not an increase of size or service is warranted at a particular location? Thank you, Warden.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden, to Councillor Sloan. So when we bring forward our benchmarking data, which is those ARUPLO guidelines, that identifies to you what our ideal space needs are. We recognize that those space needs aren't always going to be met. But when opportunities do arise, we're quick to work with our municipal partners, and we have to remember that in almost every case that the buildings are provided by our partners. And often, this is a dual conversation we're having about opportunities. And West Lauren was one good example. I couldn't have foreseen 2 years ago that we were going to get 1,000 square foot space, because that would have meant that I would have known that employment services was no longer going to be next door. But that opportunity then came up, and we took advantage of it, working with West Elgin. Another good example, even in Central Elgin's case, is in Belmont. We did put the case forward as to what our needs are back in 2016, and the need for an accessible entrance and the modifications that could take place as part of accessibility upgrades. There was an enabling accessibility fund that Central Elgin received, and so we were able to make a case then to increase our square footage. I believe in that case it was about 700 or 800 square feet that we increased it. So we're always just looking for opportunities as they arise, but certainly even in light of today's discussion about Elmer, I mean, some things are longstanding, and we're willing to be patient and willing to wait for the right opportunity to come along. So there isn't like a definitive, hey, this must be done by this date, but those guidelines do guide us in what we can justify at each location.
Councilor Zager, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. When it comes to museums and archives, I know on the library side, you've provided great benchmarking references so we can gauge based on size of collection, size of population, what the square footage should be, what the staffing should be. Are there similar benchmarks when it comes to museums and archives to try to gauge how are we doing relative to, again, collection, value to the community?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden, to Councillor Zager. As far as formal benchmarks, no. If I look back at when we were envisioning for the Heritage Center and the process that went into that, and even back with certainly Pete and Jen will remember this, that when we were envisioning even space needs for the county as a whole, and we were looking at POA and museum and so on. At that time, I brought forward a lot of information regarding facility sizes and where we shake out within that, and what the costs are associated with those facilities. And I mean, it was an eye opener at that time that we were operating at well below other county museums. So I brought that forward. It's been some time since we brought that forward. I don't think a lot of that information has changed necessarily in terms of what those numbers are out there. I mean, you're talking about some very large facilities such as Huron Bruce that are in the 40,000 square foot range, and we're operating about 10,000 square feet. So, but as far as formal benchmarking data, one time we used to have to submit a schedule to the FIR, the financial information return. That stopped about 10 years ago as well. So I'm not aware of any formal benchmarking analysis.
Any other questions for Brian? Not seeing any. Thank you, Ryan. I think we have time for Carolyn. Can you speak as fast as Brian? No pressure. Floor is yours, Carolyn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warden. Through you to the Finance Committee, Economic Development and Tourism had a very busy year in 2024. We completed our first Business Retention and Expansion Program. We interviewed 92 local businesses and we supported them in some of their immediate needs. And then based on their feedback, we developed an action plan to better support our business community. And some of the action plan items have already been implemented, as you can see in these successes. We held a few networking events last year, and this was some of the feedback that we did hear from our business community. Our Cultivating Success event took place in September, and there were over 100 participants at that event. We are also reviewing our Elk Incentives Community Improvement Plan. This was also a recommendation from our BRNE. And so we have just about completed that, anticipated to complete next month. And then we also began our development and permit process mapping initiative, another one of the initiatives coming from the BRNE. So with this program, we have been working with our local municipal partners and the building inspectors and planning technicians as well to develop a process map of what's involved with the development and building permit process program, and then provide resources for the development community. Next slide, please. So in 2024, we also supported our local municipal partners and developed some marketing materials for the township of Southwold specifically.
Carolyn, I was joking. You don't have to talk that
And
fast.
that's all right. I like to take a challenge. I could try to be a little bit faster too, but in 2024, we did also launch the People of Elgin series, and that is continuing into 2025. In fact, I think there was a video released this morning. So if you take a look at the Elgin County Facebook page, you will see that video. And last year, it's hard to believe, also saw the total solar eclipse. So that was in April, and that was a very successful event, and an event that Elgin County Tourism worked on in partnership with emergency management and also our local municipal partners. Tourism. So we redesigned our visitor guide last year, and there was lots of positive feedback on that, and also increased the number of visitors to our Port Stanley Visitor Center. Yeah, we can go on to the next slide. So for 2025, we would like to work on a new economic development strategy. Our current strategy ends in 2025, and it was all about reconnecting with the community and rebuilding after the pandemic. It focused on supporting local businesses, encouraging entrepreneurship, and strengthening partnerships across the county. So programs like the BRNE, with support from the Business Enterprise Facilitator role, and the Elgin Incentives program were key in providing support to help businesses overcome challenges and grow. The strategy also gave us a solid foundation to work from. However, we have come a long way since 2022. Thanks to the actions we've taken, we are in a much stronger position today. We've navigated challenges of the pandemic, rebuilt key relationships, and now we do have a solid foundation to build and grow on. But again, a lot has changed since 2022. The PowerCo announcement has put a spotlight on our region, and this is an opportunity for us. So it positions us to attract businesses connected to the EV supply chain, but at the same time, we need to avoid over-relying on just one industry by diversifying our economy. So this is a lesson that we've learned from the past. Another major shift is the redevelopment of the former psychiatric hospital lands, which could bring up to 7,000 to 15,000 new residents into the area. With growth like this, we need to carefully think about how we balance new housing with space for businesses and industries. It's about creating communities where people have access to jobs, services, and recreation, all while managing the costs of growth through growing our industrial tax base. So during budget planning, I met with the local municipalities, and it's clear that economic development and tourism are becoming bigger priorities for our local municipalities. Many of them have started their own economic development committees with specific goals and have also asked for more support from the county. So this shows how important it is to have a regional or county-wide strategy that guides our priorities and helps us balance the local needs with our broader county-wide goals. So our goal is to work closely with our municipalities, the economic development committees, and our business community to make this happen. We've also noticed an increase in interest around tourism development at the local level. So we want to encourage these local efforts while supporting tourism county-wide. So to move this process forward, we'll be looking to launch a robust process with input from everyone from our local municipalities, businesses, and residents. So we need to take a fresh strategic approach to planning, ensuring that we make the most of the opportunities ahead of us. And some success measures, completing the strategy and making sure that we do listen to our LMPs, local businesses, and residents, and include that feedback in our strategy. We also want to define a clear scope for economic development and tourism services and how we support our local municipal partners. We also want a plan that has a full support from County Council and our local municipalities. And this plan will guide our resource allocation over the next 5 years. Next slide, please. So with the significant opportunities for economic growth on the horizon, we also need a better understanding of our current employment lands. And that's why we're proposing the Employment Lands and Investment Attraction Study. So it's to guide growth planning and ensure that we're ready to attract and grow businesses. So this study will evaluate Elgin's employment land supply, examining the location, development status, and readiness of these lands. It will also provide a detailed analysis of economic and real estate trends, workforce availability, and key industry sectors. This information will help us identify opportunities for growth and assess gaps. The findings of this study will complement ongoing planning efforts, including the growth management strategy mentioned during the planning presentation, any potential master servicing study, and other local municipal initiatives around infrastructure, ensuring a coordinated approach to regional development. So by identifying target industries that align with our strengths, such as our proximity to major transportation routes, workforce programs, and existing employers, the study will guide us in targeting and attracting businesses that are compatible with our resources and our communities, and that are beneficial and complement our local economy. So this study will also help us get investment ready with recommendations around infrastructure development policies and economic development tools. For example, it will allow us to explore policy options that encourage the development of both large and small plots of land. So this approach ensures that we can attract both major new investments while also creating opportunities for local businesses to grow and remain in our communities. And this is some of the feedback that we did hear from the BRNE as well. So it will ensure that our employment lands are not only attractive to investors, but also capable of supporting businesses from a range of industries. And again, some of our success measures will be the completion of this study that will be supported by a regional assessment, including an economic, employment, and real estate market trend analysis. It will also involve, or a success measure, completing an employment land supply and investment readiness assessment. So how ready are our employment lands to attract investment? And through this, we want to identify the target industries that have the best potential to grow the local economy, and also identify opportunities to develop and update policies that will support employment growth. All right, so the next initiative has already been begun. This is our ELG Incentives Review and Update. So ELG Incentives is a program that began in 2015, and it was implemented for a 10-year term, which expires this year in 2025. To continue this program, we're required to do a review and then renew the program. And so this is currently being conducted, and we have done stakeholder workshops, a survey, and also some background studies doing some benchmarking of the county's economic performance and incentive offerings against neighboring and peer jurisdictions. So in 2025, our goal is to implement these recommendations. So as a result, currently, we only have $80,000 in our budget for this. That's the grant amount that we typically give to businesses. So typically, we give $80,000 in grants to our businesses, and we've just kept that the same for 2025, allocating $80,000 in grants, although the recommendations may recommend to increase or decrease that depending on what type of grants we will be focusing on. But any of those changes will be considered in next year's budget. And Initiative 4. So this is another initiative that we've already begun to create and implement a development and building permit educational campaign. So we are doing some process mapping right now, going through the development process with our building inspectors and our planning departments so that we can develop a map that gives our businesses an understanding of what they will need to do to expand or grow or to build a new facility. We did learn that many of our businesses get into business because they're passionate about what they do and they're not experts in this process and they need those extra resources at the start. So we are doing this right now and consulting with our local municipal partners, also our business community. And then our goal is to develop print and online resources to help them navigate the development and building permit process at the local and county level. And once those resources are launched, we will also launch a marketing campaign to raise awareness of these resources. And initiative number 5. So this one is ongoing as well, enhancing our economic development website and completing the tourism website. So we anticipate that these will be ready to launch before the tourism season in spring of this year. And this will be a beautiful new marketing tool that we can use to promote our tourism businesses in Elgin County, and we'll be launching it along with a marketing campaign to drive traffic to our new websites. And we will be tracking websites visits and session lengths to track how successful that launch is. And in last year, County Council approved a new Elgin County tourism wayfinding policy, and that is the policy that we want to implement in 2025. The old tourism signs have already, most of them have already been removed. I'm just confirming that with Peter. So most of them have already been removed, and we'll be installing the new cluster signage this year. And we are also working on a way to help businesses who are in rural and remote locations, who are major tourism operators, to provide signage options for them. And we do have a pretty good option that we're exploring right now that has some great feedback from our business community, and more information on that when it's available will be brought forward. So again, we're looking to launch that program this year. And then finally, we're looking to increase our participation in trade shows and events to promote tourism and also economic development in Elgin County. So typically each year we attend a number of different events to promote Elgin County. And some of those events include the National Women's Show in Toronto, where we promote tourism in Elgin, and it's great exposure. A lot of people coming to the booth, and we get to talk about Elgin County and people who are looking for day trips or a new girls' weekend out. This provides them with some options to consider, and so we're looking for more events that we can attend and promote tourism in Elgin County. And also, we're looking for a new approach in attending events within Elgin County. So we have our Elgin County Tourism booth, which you've probably seen out and about at your local community events. So this year, our goal is with our students, instead of attending those events with our tourism booth, is to have our students attend those events and our tourism coordinator as well, and to take photos and live and post and really promote the events while they're happening so that we can attract more visitors to those events live. So again, it'll be, instead of being there to promote tourism activities elsewhere, it will be in the county, it'll be attending county events to promote those events. So that is the new program that we would like to launch this year to attract tourism to our events. And then next slide. So to deliver on this plan, we do require some extra support to deliver our regular programming and then the two strategies. And then with the event attendance, that's just some conference or not conference, but trade show registrations and travel expenses in that $2,500 there. And then the next slide summarizes our budget for 2025. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Carolyn. Questions for Carolyn? Counselor Sloan, go ahead.
Warden, do we have time or did you want to, I didn't want to, it sounds like you have something else on. Do you want me to hold?
Yeah, and Blaine and I have a meeting at 4 off-site, so we got 5 or 10 minutes yet.
Okay, I just wanted, sorry, two things. One, thank you through Carolyn very much as always through the warden to you. The economic development strategy, the last slide that you had, can you explain that cost? And is that something that was, I missed, or I know I haven't been to all the last slide just before the budget, please. There. Oh, sorry. Yeah, the $75,000 for $60,000 for economic development tourism strategy. Can you explain that to me, please?
So that would be for additional support to complete that strategy. So staff would be supporting that strategy development, but with a lot of consultation with our local municipal partners, our business community, and also residents, we'd be looking for some external support to complete it.
And so that would be on top of the 5.3 people.
That is correct.
Okay. The second thing is, and help me understand this, we've chatted before and you're always good to listen to my ideas, some of them better than others, as you well know. I wondered about, and I won't take too much time here, but if you have, you know, people, we talk about targets and strategic and support, and people like to see something. You've got your magazines and there's tremendous, you know, support for our businesses when it comes to that kind of stuff. If a budget item, and I've spoken to you about this, is there ever a consideration that tourism funds are given specifically per municipality for them to do something with them? And I use as an example, as Carolyn well knows, I had a constituent who came forward asking about a Port Stanley sign. You've seen these, they have them at Toronto, at Collingwood, people get their pictures taken by them. So I did a little bit of research, and then as we were chatting and Carolyn came to visit, I also thought, you know, Port Burwell, Port Rowan, Port Dover, or excuse me, sorry, Port Bruce, was this something that we could do a bit of as an Elgin County team? And I don't want to perhaps take the time today, but I wonder if there's an opportunity sometimes. I was told that the Rodney sign and the West Lawrence sign or the Dutton sign were done with the help of Elgin County at the upper tier. And I'd just like to understand if those type of projects would be something that could be considered, i.e. through an allotment for jurisdiction. I know that Southwold and Aylmer and Dutton wouldn't have, you know, a need for a sign, or maybe they would in a different location. So I wanted to bring that forward to best understand how that could come to be part of a budget. Thank you very much.
So in exploring community improvement plans at the upper tier level, I have taken a look at a few examples, Bruce County in particular, and they do offer a grant at the upper tier level, and it is available to the local municipal partners. They can apply to this grant to fund projects like that Port Stanley sign. So that is certainly something that we can consider as we are reviewing our community improvement plan, if we need to add a stream that would fund local initiatives.
Jen, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Warden, if we're speaking directly about the Furnival Road and the large barrel signs that are entryway signage for the county, those were done when Alan Smith was here, and they were through a full grant to the county. We did not have any.
Community adjustment.
Yes, we did not put in any county dollars for that.
Just with the website redesign, Southwold, we just found out that our website is obsolete and we have to upgrade it. Is that, and I understand municipalities use that certain manufacturer, not business to do, is that the same case here where we've got to do an upgrade or find somebody else?
So initially, our website is currently on a Drupal platform and has been since, oh goodness, a long time, 2009, I don't know, before my time, but many, many years. So Drupal 7 is no longer supported. And so we are required to transfer our site. Now we are transferring our tourism site to WordPress, where the current county corporate website sits. So all of our websites will be on the same platform. So really, it is a change that is long overdue. But with WordPress, there are regular updates. And I anticipate with its popularity, it will be continued to be supported for many years.
Thank you. Any other questions for Councillor Jager? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. My comment is more about, sometimes I think you can over strategize and not leave enough resources for execution. So I am a little bit concerned, and because one of them actually in the details, I think is called a study. And I know, for example, last year we did the BRNE study. So we do the study first and it costs resources. And then out of the results, then we're going to create a strategy, which is going to require another consultant to help with that. And through all that, we still have not implemented any aspect of the strategy. And that's a lot of resources. Meanwhile, we've got 5 or 5 other programs. So I feel that I almost want to try to execute on one of the study, like take the BRNE study, finish the strategy, and start executing on that. That would be my advice. I feel like we're stretched way too thin. Like we're trying to do everything. We know on the employment lands, we know that they're not serviced. And so to me, I don't want to spend $75,000 to find out that we need services in order to attract more businesses. So this one, so we're going to wrap up today. So I would say, let's think about this, because I know you need all of those strategies. There's no doubt about that. But if we don't have the capacity to execute those strategies and actually implement them, because we're not talking about the impact on all the communications and the outreach. Like once you have a study and a strategy, I don't actually believe we're in a position to deliver the results of all of those. So my advice would be pick one, go all the way and do it well. Because you do excellent work, but you can only do so much. And I'm really, really concerned. I would like to see those 2 items gone personally.
Thank you.
Okay. Take that back for consideration with Blaine and the team. Is there anything else for Carolyn? If not, I'm gonna call today a day. I still got one more to go. So, are you ready, Catherine, with the resolution? Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I do have a resolution, but I wondered if we should try to decide when we'll call the next meeting to complete the rest of the agenda from today. I had the suggestion of Wednesday, February the 5th, whether it be in the morning or the afternoon. No, a note for you? Okay.
That's done at 9 o'clock.
How does Monday the 4th, or sorry, Tuesday the 4th look for everyone?
Looks like we have a Quorum anyway.
Is there a time preference for morning or afternoon? Oh, 10 a.m. Would 10 a.m. work?
The one.
Does 12:30 work for those online? Okay, thank you.
Good. Yep, they were 3 of them.
I voted twice.
Okay, I do have. The draft resolution is resolved that the 2025 budget presentations related to corporate activities, long-term care homes and senior services, engineering, facilities, planning and development, cultural services, economic development, and economic development and tourism be received and filed, and that the remainder of departmental budget presentations and the January 28th, 2025 Finance Committee agenda be considered at the next Finance Committee meeting to be held on February 4th, 2025 at 12:30 p.m.
Mover and seconder, please. Ketchabah, Sloan. All in favor? Motion carried. And one last motion.
Resolved that we do now adjourn at 3:13 p.m.
Mover and a seconder, please. Whitner and Latham. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.